Hello, this is Artemis_anime. Today I am reading Chapter 16, UA Sports Festival of Viridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. I'm sorry for the delay and I hope you enjoy. Izuku was released from the hospital after only a few hours. His injuries looked worse than they were. The gash on his arm needed stitches and the gash on his leg had been badly infected, likely the reason for the fever he'd developed while with Dobby in the first run, and was also to blame for him being so out of it during the crash. Luckily, there'd been a nurse on duty with an antibiotic quirk, and she took care of the infection in an hour. It hurt like a bitch, but it was better than spending the next few days holed up in a hospital. A quick trip to Recovery Girl thereafter with Nezu helped him recover completely. He was excused from class for the few days though, not that Izuku particularly minded. Despite his protests, he wasn't that worried about missing classes. He just didn't want to go to the hospitals. So here he was, wandering around UA's campus. Just because he didn't have to go to class didn't mean he wasn't going to explore. Besides, he made support items for a living in the first run, and he was itching to create a few new toys. He'd been scraping by as Viridian thus far on civilian-level goods and stuff he could snag from the dump he lived in, but broken and abandoned materials could only get him so far. If he was going to be prepared, he needed some real support gear. And there were only two people he trusted with his stuff, himself and Hatsumi Mei. The girl had been a fellow inventor and friendly rival for him during the first run. They hadn't necessarily been close, but they understood each other well enough. And Izuku knew Mei well enough to know how to interact with her eccentric side. Once she realized he was going to make babies with her, she pretty much accepted whatever he wanted to make. Plus, her energy would keep his mind off the confusion that happened earlier. He really didn't want to question reality more than he had already today. One midlife crisis was enough for him. He didn't need a second one yet. Izuku grinned at the permission slip he'd managed to talk Nezu into giving him. So long as Power Loader walked him, he was okayed to work on support items, with Nezu's blessing. Though Izuku privately thought the principal was just curious to see what his brilliant mind could cook up in the support workshops. He loved that little mouse. He was wandering around the support courses building, which was separate from the rest of the campus, in case of unexpected explosions, when he heard a distinctive bang! Instinctively, Izuku fell into a defensive position, sai in hand and at the ready, as he surveyed the area for danger. Then, he abruptly realized that it was likely just a student dealing with volatile substances. But who would be stupid enough to... Hatsume. He grinned to himself and took off in the direction of the explosion. Izuku cautiously pushed open the door to the classroom. Smoke was quickly dissipating due to the many vents in the room, likely created for this express purpose, and Power Loader was glaring at a familiar pink-haired girl. They were the only two in the room, leading Izuku to recall how first-run Hatsume had once admitted to having her own lab at UA because the other students kept complaining about her constant explosions. Power Loader noticed him first. Midoriya? He blinked in surprise. I thought you were excused for the day. I am, he grinned. But since I don't have any classes, I thought I'd work on some support gear. He handed Nezu's note over to Power Loader as Hatsume took an interest. I haven't seen you around the support course. Hero course? Yep, 1A, Izuku grinned. Midoriya Izuku. I've dabbled in support items in the past. If I hadn't ended up in the hero course, I would have ended up here. Oh, do you want to see my babies? Sure, if you'll help me with mine. Her grin matched his as Power Loader paled. Please don't blow anything up, he begged. We'll do our best, Hatsume said with a cheerful grin. No promises, Izuku stated at the same time. God help me. Majima Hagari, better known as Power Loader, wasn't happy. Well, he kind of was, but at the same time he was royally annoyed. Hakagare had typically had a hard enough time reining in Hatsume, what with her propensity to cause an explosion every 15 minutes or so, but he'd never expected to have to deal with Aizawa's problem child too. Midori wasn't as bad as Hatsume. No, he was worse. Hatsume was thrilled. The two set off some kind of volatile reaction every 5 minutes, and it was driving Hagure up the wall. He'd been ready to kick Midoriya out after the first 40 minutes until he saw the correct contraption the kid had created. A fucking ray gun. An actual working ray gun. And then he realized that as adept at heroism as Midoriya was, he was an even better inventor. He'd kick-started a competition between Hatsume and him, much to Hagure's horror. That'd been 2 hours ago. Now he was mostly hiding under his desk with a bottle of Jack Daniels. Aizawa could be angry at him later for letting Midoriya constantly blow himself up, but right now, Hagure needed to protect whatever sanity he had left. "Look, Hatsume!" Midoriya's cheerful voice sounded out. "Now I've got a ray gun, a lightsaber, an electrified grappling hook, a sound-based knockout device, and a jetpack." "Oh, please, that's child's play," Hatsume huffed, before listing off some of the stuff she'd made over the last 2.5 hours. "You know what would be really cool?" Midoriya asked, with a grin as Hagure slowly peeked out over the edge of his desk. "God, I'm too old for this. Maybe I should retire." "Oh, and what would that be, Greenie?" Midoriya didn't say anything. Instead, he passed Hatsume a piece of paper that had the pink-haired girl raising an eyebrow. "You really think something like this is possible?" Now Hagure was curious. Hatsume had been willing to try just about anything, but here she was skeptical. "What? Have ye so little faith?" Midoriya taunted. His face, hands, and arms were covered in soot and mild burns, and the only area around his eyes were clean from the goggles he'd been wearing. "Teleportation?" Hatsume raised an unimpressed eyebrow. "Teleportation." Midoriya's grin widened, teeth shining white against the marred skin. "I had a feeling you'd be skeptical, so..." He pulled out 2 small discs. He put one on the end of the table and the other on Hakure's desk. He may have sent Midoriya a glare that caused the kid to chuckle. All the boy's timidness that he'd witnessed up to this point was gone from the moment he'd walked into the support shop. This was a side of the boy he wasn't sure even Aizawa had seen. Perhaps he'd invite the heroics teacher down here sometime so he wouldn't have to suffer this alone. He cautiously backed away from the device. It might explode after all. Midoriya powered the 2 items, causing 3 metal rings to float in a blue light. Midoriya then casually tossed a small rubber bouncy ball into the device on the table. Hatsume and Hagure watched in slight awe as it disintegrated, only for the particles to reassemble within the device on Hagure's desk. The ball was misshapen and looked like a miniature spiked menace. But the particles had definitely teleported. Now Hatsume's eyes gleamed with something that terrified Hagure to his core. "Well then, Midori-chan, let's get to work, shall we?" "Let's." Hagure internally screamed. Shota groaned as he sat down at the table. Another meeting, though this time it was one he'd set up. Midoriya had agreed to talk about the hero thing he'd mentioned at the movies, and he felt that it was information the staff should hear. The kid had agreed to it, but the heroics teacher still felt bad. They'd been having meetings at least once a week this year. Normally, meetings were monthly unless something happened, but this year had already been beyond hectic. When Power Loader walked into the room looking mildly traumatized, followed by a soot-covered problem child, Shota actually let his head hit the table. "Do I want to know?" He was going to cry. He swore to God, if his problem child had gotten hurt again, he was going to lose it. "Midoriya and Hatsume are terrifying together," Power Loader shuddered. "Your student is an incredible inventor, but he needs to tone down the explosions." Shota's brows furrowed. Didn't Midoriya hate explosions? Wasn't that a trigger for him? No, that's right. It was the silence thereafter and the buildings collapsing. So, smaller explosions that he controlled himself might not set him off. Midoriya looked at Power Loader with a raised eyebrow. For the first time, Shota saw a confidence in Midoriya that bordered on cockiness. It was a good change from the timid and occasionally traumatized boy he'd gotten used to seeing. "I'd like to see you make a working lightsaber without blowing it up at least once. You have any idea on how volatile those things are? And don't get me started on the port machines. Midoriya crossed his arms with an annoyed huff. Port machines? Nezu leaned in with an interest. Hatsume and I are working on teleportation, you students. We've got the basic concept down, but about 30% of the particles seem to get lost between port A and port B. The further apart they are, the more they are lost. But we're still trying to figure out a way to reform the object within the same image it originally was. The particles can't seem to remember where they're supposed to be, so it's taking a lot of trial and error to figure out how to fix it. Though I wonder if it might be better to tear a hole in the fabric of space instead, but that could cause a myriad of problems. If it's treated like Kurogiri's quirk, though, it's got some merit, but wouldn't it be instant teleportation? His quirk opens a teleportation connection between point A and point B. It doesn't deconstruct the particles of an object or person, and he's implied that there's a space between the two tears, thusly a pocket between the portals. Pockets, spatial pockets, pocket dimensions? Maybe something that can be utilized for storage? There's an idea. If it's easy enough to tear through the fabric of space, then perhaps one wouldn't need to open a second portal to store the items? And would time even pass in the stored space, or would a form of status exist? But then there's the issue of constantly accessing from that same spatial pocket. Midoriya trailed off into incoherent mutters as the room stared at the boy in shock as Nezu grinned exuberantly. For the first time, Shota saw the mind of a powerful inventor and analyst in his student. The boy was scribbling furiously in a small green notebook that he continued to mutter under his breath. "Oh, sorry. I get caught up in my ideas sometimes," Midoriya abruptly apologized, putting his notebook away. Shota watched him melt back into the familiar, somewhat timid boy he'd grown so protective of. "Actually, if I hadn't gone into the hero course, support was my second choice." That was an interesting tidbit of information. Maybe Midoriya would let Power Loader have his student more often. As if sensing his thoughts, said teacher sent Shota a glare as if daring him to act on it. "Don't test me, Majima. I still haven't forgiven you for last April Fools." "At any rate, we can discuss this in our class later, Midoriya." Nezu smiled, and the problem child smiled back. "Now, I saw him said you mentioned being discriminated against by a hero." Yeah," Midoriya admitted, and many staff members straightened their posture. More than once, actually. He scratched the scar Shigaraki had given him. I think the biggest one was during this villain attack when I was 12. I can't remember clearly, sorry. My school had caught on fire in the midst of a villain attack, I think, or Endeavor had caused the fire, but he wasn't part of the active rescue efforts. School had been in season, and some of the kids locked me in an old unused classroom as a bad prank, so when the building caught fire, I was stuck and alone. Well, a hero was coming down the hall with a couple other kids he'd rescued, and I called out for help. I remember seeing his silhouette at the door, but then I heard one of the other kids call me out as quirkless. He left and didn't come back. "You mean he left you to burn alive?" Midnight choked out. Shota felt himself shake a little with rage. "That's right," Midoriya said with a nod, as if this was normal. I really didn't think much of it at the time. Instead, I hid under the teacher's desk, which was luckily reinforced enough to shield me when the ceiling collapsed. Well, that could contribute to why the problem child disliked fire so much. But something was wrong here. He spoke about the events as if he was discussing some game he'd played at recess as a kid, not the traumatic event it had no doubt been for the boy. If nearly burning alive was something this nonchalant for him, what the hell had the kid so traumatized that he outright refused to talk to Hound Dog about it? Shota wasn't sure he wanted to know anymore. He did. He needed to know what his problem child had gone through. The thought was terrifying. "Didn't think much of it," 13 echoed. "Midoriya, do you know who this hero was?" "No, but I recognize his voice as a hero. I just can't remember him anymore. The cameras might have caught him before they burned, though I think they were hooked up to a wireless system." "This was Aldera, right?" Nezu had a sharp gleam in his eyes as Midoriya nodded. "Yeah, my first year there." "Rest assured, I'll find this video surveillance. He won't be doing that again," Nezu said, and Midoriya relaxed with a smile. Thank you. I'd hate for him to leave another kid in that situation like that. Not everyone is as lucky as I am. A moment later, a pink-haired girl opened the room, poking her soot-covered face into the room. Midori-chan, she whined, and Midoriya tilted his head. Hatsu-chan? I thought I told you I had a meeting. But I had this breakthrough on Project Lens. Really? Did you manage to fix the overheating portion or the glowing problem? The glowing. It still gets too hot if used for too long, but I'm working on it. Go on, Midoriya. Unless you have something else you need to tell us, you're free to go. Nezu chuckled as Midoriya bolted out of the room. Good to see he has got a friend. Shota smiled softly. You mean he doesn't have any friends in your class? Hizashi frowned. He's got friendly acquaintances, but I wouldn't necessarily call them friends. He's such an introvert, and after the USJ, he seemed to pull away from them even more. It seems that Hawks and this Hatsume are his only actual friends. I've never seen him act so familiarly with anyone else. That's concerning. Cementos made a face. On another note, for those of you who haven't heard, Hanatabi was confirmed by both myself and Detective Tsukuuchi as the culprit for both the flower and the laced bracelet. He's been expelled and blacklisted from all hero schools. Legal action has also been taken. Swift and merciless. How like you? Shota shook his head, but he agreed with the actions the principal had taken. Now, the sports festival starts this Thursday, so I'm going to go over all the added security measures I've taken. Izuku leaned against the window. Kaigo hadn't let him take another train since the accident on Monday, so he'd insisted on driving him to and from school, and occasionally flying him to and from school, depending on how late they were running. Thus far, nobody had seen the two of them together, except for Hatsume, and obviously the teachers. Mei, as she'd told him to call her, was quickly becoming a good friend of his. She was a lot more outgoing and spontaneous than she was back in his timeline, and he suspected that was due to the isolation she felt from her peers during her time in UA. Well, that was that problem solved, at least. Shinzo was also another unexpected variable. The kid had come up to him on Tuesday during lunch, and the two of them ended up talking the whole time. Izuku tended to avoid his classmates for multiple reasons. He realized that they didn't really care about his quirkless status, but at the same time, they sort of babied him. Plus, it was weird to hang out with young kids when he was essentially half a century old. Shinzo felt more like a kid brother, and Hatsume was someone he'd known in his original timeline, so they were somewhat different. Perhaps that was why he enjoyed hanging around Aizawa and Namaso so much. Be careful out there, Zukun, Kaigo said as he parked. I don't want to get another call from Recovery Girl asking for your mother. Well, you're my mother hen, does that count? I'm gonna show you how much of a mother hen I can be if you don't knock it off. Kaigo sent him a mild glare, causing Izuku to laugh. But more than that, have fun. 'Kay, kiddo? I'll have you know that I'm not a kid, Izuku huffed, offended. He got out of the car as the two of them started walking towards the sports festival. You're a kid right now, Kaigo smirked, ruffling his hair. Oi! Izuku protested, pouting. Do you think it's fair if I have to go out on all this thing? I mean, I've got way more experience than these kids. Go for it. Win this, Izuku, Kaigo grinned. Show 'em what you're made of. Alright. You want to know when to head out then? Of course, you've explained the plan to me about 1,000,000 times. Don't worry, Zukun. Everything will turn out okay. Forgive me for being a pessimist, Izuku deadpanned. Apparently my optimism died with the majority of the human population. Yeah, say that a little louder. I don't think Power Loader heard you over in the arena, Izuku snorted. It's cute that you think I still care about what people think. Nah, cute is you trying to get out of your vigilante outfit at 6 in the morning, 20 minutes of sleep. Kaigo laughed as Izuku recalled the time he nearly headed to UA with his Viridian mask still on. That was one time, he defended, causing Kaigo to laugh harder. Izuku and Kaigo fell quiet as they approached the check-in arena for the event. The lady looked at Kaigo and Izuku with a raised eyebrow. Kaigo just flashed his license as heroes were allowed entrance for the purpose of scouting, while Izuku passed over his student ID. Good luck within the festival, Midoriya-san, she smiled, making Izuku blink. I'm rooting for you, personally. My mother's quirkless. Go show 'em what you're made of. She beamed, and Izuku found himself grinning back exuberantly. He also saw her giving Kaigo an appreciative smile. Maybe Hawks would gain more fans. They had to go their separate ways once inside, but Kaigo gave Izuku one more hug of reassurance, and a feather for good luck, and maybe to listen in for trouble, as the winged hero man could read the vibrations in his feathers and translate them into words. Midoriya! Ida came over with a stern and sharp hand chop. You're nearly late. We have been worried. Sorry, I had to say goodbye to my brother, Izuku smiled. He's watching me today, so we came together. Be that as it may, the festival will be starting soon. Come on, our rooms are this way. He was quickly led down the twisting and mildly confusing hallways until Ida finally stopped by the door. Izuku entered to find his entire class there. He smiled and waved at those who greeted him before taking a seat. He had changed into his gym uniform at home, opting to keep his scars a secret from his classmates. He always changed where nobody could see him, though there wasn't much he could do about the scars on his arm, but his classmates had seen those enough times to learn not to ask about them. Good. Everyone's here. Aizawa's voice made him turn to find the exhausted, and still bandaged, teacher leaning against the doorframe. Izuku idly noted that the man should have had his bandages off very soon, likely within the week, which was a good thing because he was sick and tired of having to do his Eraserhead's patrols. Even if the man was back on active duty, Viridian still did half of the patrols to encourage the idiot to rest. The green-haired boy was ready to hand in all the patrols back to his teacher because he was supporting even darker bags below his eyes than before, and that was saying something. At this point, Izuku had taken to sleeping on the weekends. He was just glad that UA had homeschool days on Saturday instead of normal school days like most of Japan. Apparently, Nezu had realized that 6 days of intense physical and/or academic training was too much, even for general education, and had changed the policy as soon as he took up the position of principal. A lot of people had been skeptical at first, but Saturdays were open day, meaning students could use the school and faculties such as training areas, libraries, gyms. After adopting this policy, UA's grade point average skyrocketed. Turns out working your students into the ground wasn't the best way to encourage academic growth. Go figure. Izuku had only half listened as Aizawa gave them something that he wouldn't exactly call a pep talk. Oh, and Midoriya, as you're the one who took first place in the entrance exams, you'll be expected to open the festival, Aizawa added as an afterthought. Izuku let his head hit the table with a resounding thump. Damn it, Sensei, you couldn't have given me more of a warning? He groaned, but he knew Aizawa was already gone. Midoriya, Todoroki stated firmly, drawing his attention. Frankly speaking, in terms of power, I believe I am stronger than you. If Izuku wasn't used to how W had been at first, he might have been offended. Okay. But you've proven yourself to be more than you first appear. I'm going to defeat you. Do whatever you want. Izuku saw the flash of surprise in the dual-haired boy's eyes. But I'm going to give this festival my all. Are you, Todoroki? He challenged back, making the classroom hold their breath. Before anyone could do anything, a call went out for them to head towards the arena. Class 1A, President Mike announced after adding in something about their villain encounter. Izuku was somewhat disappointed that the blonde didn't add on anything special for the other classes. Well, that's biased as hell. Ida gently nudged him and gestured towards the stage where Midnight was holding out a mic to him. Oh, he must have zoned out a bit. Kaigo was probably snickering in the stands. He took a deep breath and took to the stage. He'd never spoken in front of so many people before, and never on live television. He hoped that nobody could see his hands shaking. First off, I want to acknowledge all of my peers. Yes, my class had a villain encounter, but that doesn't make any other course's experiences less valid or important. Everyone is equal here, he started, and saw several appreciative looks from other courses. Secondly, he found a camera and looked right into it. This is a message to everyone at home. Those of you who dream of becoming something that everyone says you can't become. To those of you who are weak, powerless, quirkless. Do not give in to the darkness. There will always be light so long as you give chase. Give it everything you have and never stop running. You are the one with the power to rewrite the future. Never let someone else have that control. If a door is slammed in your face, then break the window. And know this. He grinned. My name is Midoriya Izuku, and I am quirkless. He heard the crowd mutter and gasp at his bold proclamation. And here today, I will prove to the world that quirkless is not worthless. Dreams are achievable, and so to those of you watching, please enjoy the show. And to my competitors and fellow students, let's all go beyond. Plus ultra, he shouted with over half the student body. With a grin and a cheering crowd at his back, he handed the microphone back to Midnight and hopped off the stage. Once he was back beside his peers, Izuku let out a shaking breath. Wow, Midoriya, I didn't know you could be so inspiring. Uraraka grinned. I feel like I'm going to throw up. There were so many people. His gaze found Kaigo, who gave him a big thumbs up. Nice job, Izuku-chan. Mei grinned as she skipped over. Several 1A members eyed her suspiciously as Izuku grinned back. Mei-chan! Izuku bounced excitedly on the balls of his feet. He could feel power loaders shudder from here. Did you bring our babies today? He thought he heard a few people choke, but that wasn't really his concern. The Todoroki's face was funny. Of course, though I'm the only one allowed to use them. I know, Izuku waved her off easily, but I'm excited to see them perform. Did you bring the jetpack? Psh, who do you take me for? Of course I brought the jetpack, and the Wonder Shield. See, this is why I should name things, Izuku sighed. Wonder Shield? Really? Mei opened her eyes to reply. When he noticed that the first event had been detailed, he smirked. Mei, what do you say a little show and tell? If you can make it to the final round, I'll tell you who the best showman would be. I knew I loved you for a reason. Break it up, gearheads. Shinzo sighed as he came over. And here I thought you two would be able to control yourselves in public. Control? What's that? Izuku tilted his head. That's something Power Loader wishes he had over us in the lab, Mei nodded sagely. Just shut up, we're about to start, Shinzo shook his head. And good luck, you two. As my only friends, I hope to see you two at the end of the finish line. He smirked just as Midnight called out for the start. Eating my dust! Shinzo shot off like a bullet. Izuku laughed as he bolted forward, jumping over the initial icy blast that Todoroki sent out as he ran along the walls, in a way that was familiar to him as Viridian. He tuned out Present Mike's announcements, vaguely recalling the course and following the events from the first run. So, yep, giant robots, then a pitfall, then the minefield, if I remember correctly, though there was something about first place. Izuku hadn't been allowed to bring anything with him, but he may or may not have gotten Momo to agree to create a small sword for him in exchange for a cookie recipe that he'd purposefully gotten the girl hooked on. Ah, bribery. A formidable foe. He brandished the blade with a grin as President Mike cried out in surprise. And Class 1A, Midoriya Izuku somehow has a sword. I thought Hero Course students couldn't bring in weapons. He didn't bring it in. It was an item created by the quirk of Yaoyorozu Momo of Class 1A. Aizawa explained. If you paid attention, you'd know that. Izuku sniggered. He loved Shota's sass. Izuku easily cut down the 0-pointer. Honestly, he held back a bit in the entrance exams, not wanting Shota to know who he was to be watching closely, to draw any real parallels between himself and Viridian. But now, considering he was going to explain himself after the festival, it didn't really matter much. He privately wondered if Nezu and Aizawa would let him keep his provisional license. He hoped so. It'd break his heart to have it taken away now. The pitfall was laughable. He didn't slow down in the slightest as he continued running across the wire. He'd faced farther drops on the edges of skyscrapers as Viridian, and landing on the ledges beneath the windows was a very hard-earned skill. He had the scars to prove it. Holy crap, Midoriya Izuku flies on the pitfall. Look at him go, he's not even slowing down. What is this kid? And he's not the only one either. Todoroki Shoto of Class 1A still holds the lead as the current second place Bakugo Katsuki of 1A flies over the obstacle as if it wasn't even there. Izuku grinned. Todoroki and Bakugo were ahead of him, which was the plan. He wanted them to get ahead. He had a plan after all. Once he reached the edges of the mine, he started digging. They were small enough blasts on their own, but together they'd make one hell of a punch. And Izuku wasn't a support maker for nothing. He disassembled a couple of them quickly, creating a small sled-like platform for him to hold onto. "What is Midoriya doing? He's falling behind," Mike warned, but Izuku smirked. Now if he was a normal support-inclined 15-year-old boy, he might just jump onto a pile of volatile mines and pray for the best. But Izuku wasn't a normal 15-year-old boy. He's a time-traveling 15-year-old boy with a PhD in computer science and a long history of making support items for a living. There is nothing normal about him, so he's already calculated the trajectory of the best angle to jump onto the pile, and he may have deactivated the safety on the mines that controlled the output of the blast. Whoops! He grinned, knowing the cameras would be able to read his lips even if he did it in English. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers, and he jumped! "I'm gonna kill him," Shota muttered to himself as he watched Midoriya soar through the sky like a rocket. The blast shook the stadium, and he knew right there the kid had somehow bypassed the safety features on the mines. Even piled together, they should never emit a blast that strong. If the kid didn't seem to know what he was doing, Shota would be legitimately concerned for the boy's physical health. Well, more than he already was. "What? Midoriya Izuku is flying across the final obstacle. Amazing! He piled the mines together to create a larger blast. Don't try this at home, kids." "Can you just shut up for once?" Shota glared. It was annoying being trapped in the soundproof booth next to one of the loudest men on the planet. Even with earplugs, it was giving him a migraine. Why did he have to do this again? "I'm the announcer. That's my job." Hisashi looked very satisfied. Shota made sure his husband's hands were away from the red button before he spoke. "I love your voice. I really do. But it's a little loud and it's giving me a headache. Think you can tone it down a little?" "Alright, Sho. Sorry." Hisashi risked a quick peck on the cheek that had Shota scowling in embarrassment. "Hisashi, we're in public." "Relax, Sho. Not like anyone's paying attention to the announcement booth when there's that kind of action going on down there. Besides, it looks like the listener's taking first place." He smirked before clicking the microphone back on. "And first place goes to Midoriya Izuku." The crowd cheered, though several jeered. He glared at them, wishing he could say something about it, but right now, he couldn't. He couldn't cuddle the boy. He'd announced himself quirkless on live TV, all on his own, and that given Shota and the rest of the staff a heart attack. They hadn't expected the boy to announce it, and had planned on implying that he had an intelligent quirk or some kind. But he supposed that it was the logical decision in the end. It wasn't something that could be hidden for long, and while he was sure the kid had been scared shitless, he looked perfectly calm, almost challenging. It was as if he was daring the world to shove him down so he could prove them wrong. And he was proving the world wrong. While his actions had been shocking, Shota knew that his announcement was going to garner tons of support from people who had weak quirks or no quirks. People like Midoriya and Viridian. Speaking of, he glanced down at his phone.
Viridian Chaos. Midoriya's got guts, saying what he said on national television. Dadzawa. National? You do realize that the UA Sports Festival is a global event, right? It's mostly a big deal in Japan, true, but people from all over the world tune in. Viridian Chaos. Come again? Shadow Slayer. Viridian Chaos. Shay, not cool. You knew and didn't tell me? Furry. I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like you're in the festival. Viridian Chaos. Something tells me the kid didn't know. Scream. I'm sure he didn't, but we didn't want to freak him out too badly, so we never bothered to correct it. That's why we didn't tell him he'd be the opening to the festival until 5 minutes beforehand. Viridian Chaos. That's cruel. Couldn't give him the time to form a speech? That's Zawa. He did fine. I don't see what you're complaining about. Speaking of, are you attending or watching? Scream. Yeah, I'd love to meet you. Come join us for the show in the announcer's booth. I'm sure the crowd would love a surprise guest, especially from such a new and popular hero. Viridian Chaos. Actually, I'm streaming it on my phone. I'm out of town for a little bit. Got some leads in Hosu to look for. That's all. Hosu? Fury. That's new. What kind of leads? Wait. Didn't you mention Hosu to me before? Viridian Chaos. Yeah, I had you implement the buddy system over there. Bnha. I'm actually in Hosu as well. The chief over here is taking a well-earned vacation, so I'm covering for a couple of weeks. Drop in sometime and have lunch with me. Viridian Chaos. Will do. I'm actually looking into rumors of Stain.
Shota startled.
That's Zawa. Stain? As in the hero killer that nearly killed you several months ago? Viridian Chaos. Yup, that's the one. Scream. Wait, you've met him? Are you going in alone? Viridian Chaos. I've asked a few other heroes to help out. I'm not stupid or suicidal, thanks. I've given them all SOS badges with built-in trackers. If anyone runs into him, the signal will go out immediately and alert local heroes and police. That's all. You've thought this out. Viridian Chaos. Of course I have. He almost killed me once. I'm only alive because he let me live. Guy's got some pretty hardcore ideals, with the determination of steel. He won't come quietly. If I remember correctly, he can paralyze people by ingesting their blood. Scream. Creepy. That explains why there's rarely signs of struggle, though. Viridian Chaos. I'll let you guys get back to announcing. Intermission's almost over, and I would hate to keep you. That's all. Please check in with us often. I don't like the thought of you chasing after Steen. Viridian Chaos. Will do. Shadow Slayer. I'll keep you guys posted. No worries.
Somehow, Shota wasn't convinced. At any rate, the second round was starting, the cavalry match. He smirked when Problem Child's points were announced, but paled when he paired with Hatsume and Shinzo. Their fourth player was Tokuyami, a mid to long-range fighter. Shota was interested to see what the plan was. Despite what he expected, Midoriya did not keep the headband on himself, but gave it to Shinzo instead. Shinzo became the rider while Tokuyami was the horse. Hatsume and Midoriya were the flanks, and Midoriya was quick to break off from the front formation to go out and attack the other teams. He grinned. The kid was fast enough on his own to snatch headbands and occasionally knock riders off, disqualifying teams, while Tokuyami and Hatsume were plenty to keep a solid defense, especially since Hatsume's inventions got them airborne. It was a fairly solid strategy, and Shota found himself impressed at the speed with which Midoriya moved. In fact, sometimes Shota lost sight of the kid, even though he hadn't looked away. He vaguely reminded him of Viridian. A thought suddenly occurred to him. Did Midoriya know Viridian? Were they perhaps related? Now that he was really looking into it, it was clear as day. Midoriya's movements were identical to Viridian's. Was Midoriya Viridian's son? The man could certainly be old enough to have kids, but one Midoriya's age? But it made sense. The way Midoriya was secretive about his living arrangements and his reluctance to let anyone meet his parents. And Viridian's reports were too damn detailed. There was no way the man could learn this much just from watching. No, it had to be something like this. Viridian was either Midoriya's father or his uncle, possibly brother. There was really no other explanation. Plus, quirklessness could run in the family, so it would make even more sense in that case. Not to mention the fact that Viridian, for whatever ungodly reason, wanted Shigaraki's head on a silver platter, and Midoriya seemed to have a similar dislike for the man. Had he, perhaps, killed someone dear to them? Shota shook his head. There was no point in overthinking this right now. Maybe Midoriya's explanation after the festival would help shed some light on things. For now, he'd just have to wait. He'd inform Tsukuchi of his suspicions later. He smirked when the second round finished with Midoriya not only keeping his headband, but nearly stealing Todoroki's as well, causing the boy to instinctively activate his fire. No, Today would be an interesting day indeed. Midoriya, we need to talk. Izuku wasn't sure what he was expecting when Todoroki called him out to a private location to speak. He certainly hadn't been expecting the kid to dump his entire life story on him. Work marriage, huh? Poor Toya. That explains a lot. So, what do you want me to do about it? Izuku leaned against the wall, and Todoroki glared. You're saying you don't care? I'm not expecting you to do anything. I'm not saying I don't care. I'm asking you why you told me. You act like there's something you want. I want you to answer this honestly. Are you Viridian's secret love child? Izuku choked for a moment in shock before laughing at the absurdity of that statement. Was he his own love child? Kaigo would burst a gut too. Sorry, that just really caught me off guard. I thought you were gonna ask me something serious. Izuku wiped away a tear. No, I'm not Viridian's kid, though I do know the guy. He smirked. I see. Todoroki, Izuku said as the kid started to walk away. He paused. If you ever need a safe place to stay, you can crash with me. My place isn't the best per se, but it's safer than staying with an abuser. I know Endeavor can't be treating you right, you or your siblings. I've got a friend with a place to crash too. He won't ask many questions, and knows how to keep a secret. He scribbled something down and handed it over to the kid. My number if you need to reach me. Why? Because you need help. I need no one's help, he glared. Izuku stared at him for a long moment before Todoroki turned and walked away. He sighed and went back to the eating area. He sat down beside Shinso and Mei as the two argued about something he wasn't quite in the headspace to comprehend. There you are. I was worried, Mei huffed. You need to eat more. She's right, you know. You're, really skinny. You're one to talk, Izuku snorted. Yeah, that's coming from me. Shinso crossed his arms. Ladies, please. Kaigo sat down from across them, and Shinso and Mei immediately went quiet. Several nearby 1A students also became hushed. They obviously hadn't expected to see the number 3 hero here. The only lady I see here is you, Izuku snarked back without missing a beat. He saw Ida stand up to reprimand him when Kaigo snorted in amusement. Well, you do call me a mother hen. Is that chicken on your plate? Izuku gasped in mock horror. Kai-chan, a cannibal? Oh, ha ha. Kaigo rolled his eyes. What's the pot calling you kettle black? I see a steaming pile of broccoli right there on your plate, Zukun. He poked his fork towards the green pile of goodness. And I happily consume the tiny trees covered in delicious garlic butter, Izuku grinned, popping one in his mouth. Wait, you know Hawks? Shinso blurted out. Yup, Izuku grinned. Kai-chan, this is Shinso and Mei, my friends. Shinso, Mei, this is Kaigo, my brother in all but blood. The two gaped for a long moment, and Izuku was beyond amused when Ida was frozen with his mouth hanging open in shock. He also thought he saw Todoroki muttering to himself about hawks and brothers. Cool, so he's a conspiracy theorist. Awesome. Izuku may or may not have stolen a chicken wing off Kaigo's plate when he wasn't looking. After that, conversation seemed to pick back up, this time with Kaigo joining in. It was only towards the end of their lunch break that Bakugo of all people approached him. We need to talk. Wasn't that a familiar phrasing? Izuku sighed. What was up with people dragging him away today? Regardless, he followed along, mostly out of curiosity. Bakugo led him into a small side room, and Izuku tensed, preparing for a fight if need be. You know, if you wanted a one-on-one, you could just wait until the finals. I'm not here to fight you, Bakugo said, looking oddly calm. He swallowed hard before glancing around, making sure they were alone. Then Bakugo got down on his knees. Izuku blinked once, twice. He pinched himself and bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. Nope. This was fucking real. What? I'm sorry. He spoke softly, as if afraid of Izuku's reaction. I was wrong. It seemed he was trying not to curse, either. A valiant effort. Wrong? bully you. Damn it, I was just like her. He realized abruptly that Bakugo was crying. That Kachan was crying. I can't believe I was ever like that. But every time you looked down on me with those eyes, I thought you were looking down on me. But now I realize you were never looking down on me. You were afraid of me. What kind of hero can I be if I only hurt other people? I should have been protecting you, not hurting you. He looked up at Izuku, eyes shining brightly with tears. I know I can't ever apologize enough for what I've done or what I've said, but Izuku. Izuku was startled at his name coming out of Bakugo's mouth for the first time since they were 5. I promise. Bakugo's voice broke as tears flowed. I swear it. I'll become a hero that inspires others to be strong for all the right reasons, to be strong enough to protect the ones who need protecting. I'm still aiming for number 1, but that can wait. That will always be there for me to reach, but people won't. I don't want anyone to put someone through what I put you through. I vow to become a better person. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out somehow. He stared. This was something he never thought he'd ever see. He blinked a couple times to clear his vision as tears flowed down his own face. He kneeled down on the floor next to the blonde. Kachan. Red eyes widened in surprise at the nickname he never expected to hear again. A nickname Izuku had never expected to use again. It's been a while. He smiled a bit, reaching out gently, wiping some of the tears from the startled blonde. Yeah, it has, Kazu. Izuku chuckled at the old name. When they were kids, Kachan often had trouble saying Izuku's name, and often missed Izuku Ikizu, meaning let go, with something Kachan had said to him a lot when he wanted to play, and Izuku was taking too long. Eventually, due to childish mispronunciation, Kachan decided that Kazu was close enough and started calling Izuku that. If he hadn't heard Bakugo call him by his given name since he was pronounced officially quirkless at 5, he hadn't heard that old nickname since they were about 4. He'd almost forgotten about it if he was being honest. I'm not saying it's right, because it's not, and there are a lot of things I can't forgive you for, but Izuku looked up at him. Really looked. If you follow through with this, then that's enough for me. He held out a hand just like he had all those years ago at the bridge. This time, Kachan took it without hesitation. Can I still call you Kazu? He asked, cheeks tinged with a light red. Izuku chuckled. Only if I can still call you Kachan. Kachan's smile was light and carefree as he gave a small laugh. A laugh that Izuku was sure the blonde hadn't made in nearly a decade, if the startled look on the boy's face was any indication. Izuku grinned. Come on, we've got a festival to finish. Yeah, don't think I'm gonna lose to you, nerd, he teased, but the old jab didn't have the same venom it used to. You're calling me a nerd? Mr. Bedtime's 8 sharp with no excuses? He lightly teased back, earning a friendly shoulder bump from the boy. Huh, amazing. I never thought I could ever change the timeline this much. Maybe Kachan won't die bitter and alone this time. This time, he won't become a Nomu. Kaigo had been enjoying the festivities, but all good things had to come to an end, and he had a promise to keep. He'd wanted to stay for the whole thing, but that wasn't an option. He was currently flying to Hosu en route to the general area Izuku had pointed him in. According to his charge, sometime this afternoon, Ingenium would accidentally run into the hero killer Stain. He'd be gravely injured and end up paralyzed from the waist down. Kaigo wouldn't let that happen. Izuku had been more than reluctant to let him go off and fight Stain himself. He supposed that knowing the other man would survive versus the unknown risk of his brother possibly dying was something to be concerned about, but Kaigo reminded Izuku that they were heroes. The risk came by with the job. He wouldn't, stand idly by when he could help somehow. Obviously, any anonymous tips would be treated with either a ton of suspicion or outright rejected as a bad prank. This meant that Hawks would either 1. Have to do this himself, or 2. Find the trouble and then call for backup. They'd spent countless hours going over all sorts of scenarios and analyzing the hero killer's quirk and fighting style. Izuku hadn't had much to go off of, considering he only encountered the man once in this timeline. But it was better than nothing, he supposed. Izuku had also gifted Kaigo with a ton of new gear, including a ray gun, a sound-based stun gun that would hopefully knock out whoever it was aimed at. Izuku had said the latter was untested and should only be used as an absolute last resort, as he wasn't sure if it'd knock out the user or not. It shouldn't, but there were no guarantees. The vigilante turned legal hero had also provided him with an SOS beacon based off of the one Nezu had gifted the Knot Boy with. Damn, time travel was confusing, and he wasn't even the one traveling. He didn't know how Zuko kept everything straight. Kaigo smirked as he found Ingenium out on his patrol. For a moment, he sat on the edge of the rooftop and stared. It was so hard to believe that this guy he was staring at was about to nearly die. That today, if Kaigo didn't intervene, would be the last day he'd ever be able to walk or run. That this simple, rather unremarkable day would turn so dark. He checked his phone, shooting off a text to Izuku through their private group chat, though it wasn't much of a group chat with only 2 people.
Mother hen, I found him. Telling him now. Broken clocks. Good. Keep a close eye on him. He'll attack in an alleyway. Wait until he's alone. Call for backup as soon as you can. For the love of time, Kai. Be careful. I can't lose you too. Mother hen. I know. I'll be careful. Broken clocks. GTG. I'm up against Shinzo. Wish me luck. Mother hen. Luck? You don't need it. Winky smiley emoticon. Have fun, kiddo.
Todoroki Shoto wasn't a guy that was intimidated easily. After having gone through countless training sessions with Endeavor, one tended to grow very strong very quickly. But privately, he'd admit that Midoriya Izuku scared him. There was something about the kid that sent him on edge, even when he wasn't doing anything remotely related to fighting. He'd known that he could fight. The battle trials were a testament to that, and he'd heard rumors of Midoriya had held off some villains at the USJ incident, even going as far as to kill some of them to protect Asui and Kirishima. And speaking of, the two constantly tried to get close to the boy, but he kept pushing everyone away. It was like he thought they weren't worth his time, or maybe that he wasn't worth theirs. Though he noted the boy had grown very quickly attached to that pink-haired girl in support, and the purple-haired boy in general education. But that wasn't the point. The fact that he'd fended off villains was nice and all, but it could have been luck, or minor skill. It shouldn't have indicated that this quirkless kid could be any sort of threat to him. And yet, as he watched the boy fight, he could tell he was majorly holding back. Not because he was arrogant, but because he didn't want to kill his opponent. The realization sent an unwelcome shiver down Shoto's spine. Suddenly, it didn't really matter that this kid was quirkless, that he should be easy to defeat. He hardly ever listened to his father as he threatened him again to use his fire. The image of Midoriya with those shining green orbs staring at him with such intensity, that was where his mind was. When he'd looked at him in that tunnel, he'd stared at him with an odd mixture of pity, sorrow, and understanding. It was a combination that Shoto had never really experienced before, that he had no idea could have brought it on. But there was also a flash of anger. That's when he stepped into the ring with said boy. At first, they traded blows on a shockingly equal terms, but Shoto quickly grew frustrated when he realized the boy was holding back again. "Why won't you fight me seriously?" he asked the greenette as he sent another wave of ice at him. The boy easily dodged the wave as he slid down from the top. "Why won't you?" he countered.
Shoto's stall read, "Did he set you up to this?" He thought that Midoriya was better than this. Endeavor? Hell no, I hate that guy. Midoriya snorted. "No, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about you. I won't use his fire. I've told you that." "It's not his fire, Todoroki. It's your quirk. It runs in your veins. Your hair isn't his. It's yours. Your quirk is the same. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand. You have an incredible gift, Todoroki. One I would kill to have. Do you have any concept of what it's like to grow up quirkless? We aren't even treated like human beings," Midoriya spat, and Shoto abruptly recalled the movie theater incident. That had been a rough wake-up call to a lot of the class members, himself included. He'd never thought that people would treat a perfect stranger so cruelly based on only quirk status or lack thereof. And the way Midoriya was talking about it, it's obvious that that wasn't the worst of his treatment. But he still didn't see what this had to do with his fire. "You're insulting me and everyone here. Everyone's giving it all, but you're half-assing it. It's really pissing me off." He glared. "You can't be a hero on only half your power, Todoroki. If you can do that, you'll let people die. One day, your ice won't be enough, no matter how hard you train it. And you can't always end a fight before hypothermia sets in." Shoto clenched his fist. "It's your quirk," he repeated, and something about the way he said it dredged up an old memory. A memory of his mother from just after he'd gotten his quirk. He'd created a small spark of fire in one hand and made a bird for his mother, who'd smiled happily at the creation. She told him the same thing, that it was his quirk. She'd believed he could become a hero. "You're one crazy son of a bitch," Shoto chuckled under his breath as flames sparked to life. "There we go. Helping your enemies? Don't you want to win?" "Oh, I plan on it," Midoriya grinned cockily. "But now that you're not holding back, I won't hold back either." He changed his fighting stance abruptly, and Shoto realized something very important. Midoriya was left-handed. This whole time he'd been fighting right-handed. Oh shit. He charged his attack and released. Shota nearly had a heart attack when he saw Todoroki charge at Midoriya full power. He'd never seen the boy use his flames before. Damn it, problem child. And he wasn't sure he knew how to control them as well as he did his ice. Then there had also been the fact that apparently Midoriya had been holding back too. He'd only barely caught it, but the change in the kid's fighting style meant that he'd been using his non-dominant side as his primary means of fighting up until this point. He vaguely recalled Midoriya using his left side during the USJ incident. At the time, he hadn't fully registered the fact, nor had it come up again. Shota had brushed it off as a side effect of his concussion and left it at that. The only thing that kept him from rushing out onto the arena was Hisashi's gentle hand on his arm. "You can go check on him once the match is called," he reminded him. He glared, but he knew it was the logical course of action. Midnight and Cementos had tried to stop the fight there too, but the two had somehow broken through the concrete barriers that had been hastily erected. Everyone waited with bated breath as the dust settled. A figure stood just within the barrier of the circle, while another was laying on the ground just outside of it. "You're shitting me." Shota's eyes were wide. "And Midoriya wins! Amazing! Todoroki Shoto is outside of the ring!" Hisashi announced as the crowd roared, riding off the high of the fight. Midoriya hopped down, looking moderately injured, but not as bad as Shota feared. He offered Todoroki a hand, which the other teen hesitantly took. The Erasure hero then left the room, intent on meeting the two at Recovery Girl's temporary setup. He vaguely noted that Hisashi had announced a 40-minute or so break to fix the fighting area. Probably for the best then. When he came into the room, Recovery Girl already had both Todoroki and Midoriya set up in beds. "Sensei," Midoriya greeted. "Problem child," he sighed. "How bad?"
Nothing too major, just a sprained ankle and a few mild second-degree burns. Some bruising and I think a few cracked ribs, Midoriya listed off as the recovery girl nodded. Sounds about right, she sighed. Todoroki, on the other hand, has a broken arm, cracked ribs, a mild concussion, and a hairline fracture to his cheekbone. Sorry, Midoriya apologized. Don't, Todoroki said, and Shota noted that there was a lot more warmth in their tone than there used to be. You've made me realize a few things. If anything, I should thank you. Thank me sometime by hanging out with me outside of school? Yeah? Grab an ice cream with Mei, Shinzo, and I? What part of you're being targeted by villains does this kid not understand? Shota internally groaned. A knock at the door drew their attention as Hatsume and Shinzo poked their heads in, alongside Asui and Kirishima. Midoriya tilted his head in confusion. Hi? Damn it, Izuku. You just keep getting hurt, don't you? Hatsume groaned. But awesome win, by the way. You're up against Bakubro next, right? Kirishima grinned, and Midoriya choked at the nickname. He lets you call him that? I mean, he's gotten used to it. Midoriya snorted. Yeah, assuming he wins his fight against Uraraka. You gonna be okay? I know the two of you have a bit of a history, Shinzo asked softly, causing Midoriya to raise his eyebrows. What? I can pick up on these things. We've actually sort of patched things up recently, so yeah, I'm looking forward to the match. Shota eyed Bakugo as he stood in the doorway. I'm gonna win. Don't doubt me. Kachan! Midoriya brightened with the grin. The blonde huffed but accepted the childish nickname, making Shota blink. Rest up, Kizu, because I'm not gonna go easy on you. He looked Midoriya in the eye, then gave him a tiny smile. Not a smirk, not a feral grin, but an honest-to-God smile. Bakugo stepped out of the room a moment later, and Shota followed him. So you found your answer? I think so. I'll ask you again then. What kind of hero do you want to be? One who protects, Bakugo answered, with steel in his voice. I'll become the strongest so I can protect everyone. Shota took a good long moment to look the boy in the eyes. There was a fire that wasn't there before. No, that fire had always been there, but it had been a raging inferno of anger up until this point. Now it was controlled. It was bright and sure, and it made Shota grin. You'll be a great hero one day, kid. Never lose sight of your goal. He made his way back to the announcement booth. Midoriya was relatively fine, and he had friends with him. Bakugo was changing for the better, and was now set on a much violent and bloodthirsty path in life. And Todoroki seemed to have overcome some kind of internal blockade. In short, Shota wasn't needed here right now, so he could go and take a nap. He texted Viridian instead, worried about his friend who hadn't checked in for several hours.
Dadzawa, at Viridian Chaos. You okay? Haven't heard from you in a bit.
He put his phone back in his pocket, keeping his hand wrapped around it as he waited for the reply. He walked over to Nemuri and Cementos to inform them of Midoriya and Todoroki's conditions, and that Midoriya was willing and able to fight in his next match. Hisashi greeted him when he stepped back into the booth. No reply? He glanced at his own phone that had the Vigilante chat open. Shota frowned. Not yet. I'm getting a bit worried. He's after Stain, but he hasn't checked in for a while. Maybe we should. Hisashi's eyes flashed his phone when a call came through. It was from Ida's mother. The two shared a look of trepidation before Hisashi picked it up. Ida-san? He paused as the woman spoke. Tensei, is he okay? What happened? Shota stiffened. Tensei was a good friend of theirs, and if something had happened to him... Oh, thank God. Shota relaxed minutely at the relief in Hisashi's voice. It told him that he was at least alive. Are you sure? I mean, wouldn't Tenya want to? Yeah, I guess I can understand that. If that's what Tensei wants. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, I'll tell Sho. Take care, and let him know to expect a visit from us soon. Hisashi hung up the phone.
What happened? Tensei was attacked by Stain. What? Shota felt his blood go cold. He's fine. Somehow he survived without any permanent damage, Hisashi quickly amended. He said that another hero was apparently on the scene and saved his life. Hawks, apparently. Hawks? I thought he was here watching Midoriya. Shota's brows furrowed. He was. I saw him in the lunchroom earlier. Hisashi shrugged. I don't know what made him suddenly leave and go to Hosu, but he showed up and saved Tensei's life. He got banged up pretty nicely too, so I'm expecting to tell Midoriya to get a call sometime soon. Tensei didn't want to tell his brother until after he's out of the sports festival. Of course he doesn't, Shota sighed. Tensei was too soft-hearted when it came to his baby brother. Things will be okay, Sho. Come on, the matches are picking back up. I swear, next year you are not dragging me into this stupid booth. You can announce with memory. Sho! Kayama and Memory watched with a close eye as Midoriya and Ida stepped into the ring. Ida was her childhood friend's baby brother, and Midoriya was the UA staff's not-so-secret favorite this year. If only because the boy had been so wronged by the world in more ways than she could count. Either way, this was an interesting matchup, and she was looking forward to seeing the results. She eyed the crowd warily. Many people were holding signs supporting Ida. A few people held up signs that put Midoriya down for lacking a quirk. Quirkless filth, go home, stop cheating, and other similar signs that could be spotted around the arena. Luckily, Ectoplasm and 13 were escorting those people out of the festival, so the signs were quickly dwindling. In all honesty, it'd only taken them around 20 minutes to fix the stage, but they'd wanted to let the contestants rest a bit more. The fight had been brutal after all. She grinned as the fight started. Ida made his move first. A mistake. Midoriya nimbly dodged the attack, nearly causing the speedster to run out of the ring on his own accord. You can't reach full speed in here. The space is too small, Midoriya taunted lightly. You're fast, I'll give you that. But can you fight? Of course I can, Ida replied, indignant. She couldn't help but feel like Ida would have lost instantly to Shinzo. The poor kid hadn't gotten the opportunity to show off his quirk since Midoriya kept his mouth shut. It was a game of cat and mouse for a while. Midoriya kept dodging Ida's attacks and dealing light blows on his own. Nothing major. He likely didn't want to strain any injuries Recovery Girl hadn't been unable to fix. Wow, smart kid, Cementos noted. Huh? Nemuri blinked. What was he talking about? You didn't notice? He chuckled as Ida started to slow down significantly. Look at what he's doing. Abruptly, Ida's left leg just sort of gave out. Midoriya pounced on the opportunity like he'd been waiting for it and quickly shoved Ida out of the ring, winning the match. In terms of speed, I can't win, but I can use your speed against you, Midoriya said. I don't understand. I may have looked like I was dodging randomly, but I wasn't. Did you notice how I kept making you turn on your left leg? You pivot too much on that one side, so I made sure to keep you on lower to the ground to exhaust you faster. I overworked one specific muscle cluster in your thighs, knowing that sooner or later it'd give out on you. Nemuri stared. The kid had a plan from the start? Shota was explaining over the intercom for the crowd and viewers as Midoriya explained it for them and Ida. Ida laughed suddenly. You're amazing, Midoriya. I would have never thought to use my opponent's own body against them. You truly are the better hero. You're great too. Your quirk is amazing, you know? Speed like that. I can come up with about 100 different ways to use that in the fight. Mind if I bounce the ideas off of you? Of course, I'd be honored. Well, at least it looked like those two wouldn't be bitter over the match. Though, if Nemuri was being honest, she was fairly concerned about the next match of Midoriya's. Bakugo was rather violent, and despite Shota's reassurances that the two were patching things up, she knew that a match like this could make all of that progress disappear. She hoped for the little green bean's sake that things would turn out alright. Izuku cracked the vertebrae in his neck with a satisfied sigh. Keep doing that and you'll get arthritis, Shinzo warned. I'll worry about that when I'm 30, Izuku shrugged. It never bothered him in the first run, so he doubted this one would be any different.
His phone rang suddenly, playing Kaiko's ringtone. He swiftly picked it up. "You still alive?" he inquired, earning a raised eyebrow from his purple-haired friend. "Yeah, somehow." "Damn, Sue, how did you survive that encounter with him? I know you said he was fast, but holy shit." "Look, besides, didn't I tell you the first time? He let me live." Shinzo's other brow rose to meet the first. "He got away," Kaiko said. "I wasn't able to catch him. He backed off when he realized who I was, but I did get a little banged up." The final little. Izuku crushed the worry rising that tried to claw his way up its spine. Kaigo would be fine, but he also hadn't really planned on staying escaping Kaigo's grasp. But he could improv this. He had to. Ida's life depended on it. Sprained wing, a few cracked bones, minor lacerations, and a nasty gash on my arm. That's about it. Like I said, little. Unlike some people, my little typically means non-life-threatening. Izuku let out a breath. "Hey, give me some credit, yeah? I haven't died yet. How long is the hospital holding you captive?" "They shouldn't be a yet," Kaigo huffed. "The hospital is only keeping me for a day or so. Ida's fine, nothing permanent. Got there just in time." "Got there? I thought you said you were tailing him." "I was, but the guy's fast. I nearly lost him a few times." "Thank you, Kai-chan," Izuku smiled. It was a huge weight off his shoulders that the elder Ida's hero's career wasn't cut short this go-around, despite the imminent danger that the younger Ida found himself in should he feel the need for vengeance. "Any leads on that other thing?" "Not yet. He's good at staying hidden." "Keep an ear out, yeah?" "Of course." "Oh, and let me know if you need me to bust you out of there. Hospital's stuck, and I need my support chicken back soon." Shinzo snorted at the same time Kaigo spluttered, "Support chicken!" Izuku hung up, chuckling. "I'm not getting an explanation for that strange, somewhat concerning conversation, am I?" Shinzo sighed. "Nope." Izuku stopped when he saw Endeavor standing before him. He subtly moved so he was in front of Shinzo. "I don't know what kind of trick you pulled to win that fight, but I don't buy it," he growled. Izuku stared at the man impassively. "Tricks? The only trick I used was hard work, training. It's called skill, Endeavor. I don't need a quirk to win." "You think you can get away with talking to me like that, you quirkless filth?" he snarled, lighting one fist on fire. Izuku raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Oh look! The trash is on fire. No wonder it stinks over here." He quietly snorted as a look of rage came over Endeavor's face. "Oh, sorry, I thought that since you insulted me, I was given a free card to insult you. Is that not how this works?" "I'll show you how." The larger man's flames abruptly cut out as Izuku internally grinned. Right on time, show. "Mind explaining why you're attacking two students?" Aizawa-sensei looked very intimidating, with glowing red eyes and floating hair. Red eyes flashed in anger as his cheeks stung. He shook the thought away. Endeavor looked ready to sprout more crap about how he cheated, and there was no way quirkless filth had defeated his precious Shoto, before thinking better of it. Izuku was mildly disappointed the man seemed to have a few more brain cells than he'd given him credit for. "Nothing. I was just congratulating him on his win." Endeavor sneered as he turned around and abruptly walked off. "What an ass," Izuku sighed. "Dude, you were so calm. He was about to punch you with a flaming fist." Shinzo looked dangerously pale. "And?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Problem child." Aizawa took a deep breath. "Explain." "He thought I cheated, so he threatened me," Izuku shrugged. "I'll admit, I knew he was a flaming pile of garbage, but I hadn't realized he was a quirkist flaming pile of trash can too. Though, maybe I should have." He scratched his chin as he thought, idly missing his stepple. "Please try not to piss off Endeavor. He's known for being particularly violent." Aizawa looked like he was internally crying. "If by particularly violent you mean kills 36% of villains he encounters, then yes. He's particularly violent.
especially when compared to the typical 3 to 7% mortality rates of most hero-villain encounters. How do you know that? Shinzo stared. I ran a lot of calculations in my spare time. I got bored a lot and I used to be a hero fanboy. Izuku shrugged. Used to be? Aizawa asked. Some things happened that deluged me when I was younger. Aizuku winced, thinking of the rooftop conversation with All Might. Obviously, Aizawa's mind went to his little, true, story of a hero that had left him to burn alive. Right. At any rate, your next match will start up in about 10 minutes. I wanted to check up on you and see how you were holding up. Careful, Sensei. People might think you care, Izuku teased lightly. Aizawa blinked for a moment before Izuku realized his mistake. That was something rather out of character for Izuku, but perfectly in character for Viridian. He supposed it didn't matter much though, considering they'd know soon enough. Aizawa gave him a small smile and ruffled his hair, making Izuku blink up at him in surprise. For a split moment, he saw Sho, not Aizawa-sensei. He blinked back, and the foreign wetness in his eyes as his hand traced down the burn scar inside of his left wrist. Maybe I do, problem child. It was so quiet that Izuku almost didn't hear it. He could see Aizawa smiling softly into his capture weapon. If you need anything, you can find me in the announcement booth with Present Mike. Thanks. I'll be fine, Sensei, he grinned. I'll see you from the winner's podium, he called after Aizawa as he walked off. Izuku swore he heard the hero laugh.
Katsuki had been looking forward to this fight. He'd been looking forward to this fight for years now. But this also wasn't quite how he had imagined the fight to go. It started normally enough. It was Izuku now. The little turd had anticipated his right hook, which Katsuki had expected. He may make fun of the nerd, but he knew he was really good at analyzing people. It pissed him off because Izuku was always right. The same tactics and tricks would never work on him twice. But Katsuki had instincts that were made for fights like this. He flew into a battle ready to win. Except he wasn't. He'd thrown his best, most volatile, strongest, fastest, and most intrusive and inventive moves at Izuku, and he dodged, tanked, or neutralized every single one of them. Every time without fail. Now he was at a loss. What could he do now? He'd thrown everything he had at Izuku, and the guy just kept getting back up and throwing something new into the mix. Since when was the nerd this good? He'd never been adept at fighting before UA. His mind kept supplying him with the looks. The image of Izuku the day he'd told him to jump off a roof. He would have described him as a young boy with bright, hurt, innocent eyes and a soft heart. But when he'd seen Izuku again, just a day or so later, he'd looked completely different. He had the look of a man, not a boy. He didn't know how because he still looked the same, but it was more the horror he gave off. There was a shadow in his eyes like he'd seen something horrible, but it'd only been a day. What the fuck could he have seen in such a short amount of time? He didn't buy the trauma card Izuku kept playing. It looked like trauma, but stuff like that didn't suddenly appear overnight. There was something more to this entire mess, and Katsuki wanted to know what. Because the nerd never fought like this before. This was different than the battle trials too. Like he was fighting for something more on the line than what Katsuki could comprehend. He tried one more last-ditch effort. Fuck his wrist and shoulder. He could deal with the consequences later. He fired off the biggest explosion he'd ever made in his life, right at Izuku. And somehow, the nerd managed to duck under him enough that he could deflect the blast upwards, protecting himself and the crowd. He then kicked Katsuki hard in the stomach, and he knew he could feel it. He glanced down. His feet were just outside the white line. Bakugo Katsuki had lost. But for once, he wasn't bitter about it. He wasn't angry, not really. He was disappointed, but there was a sort of relief there. Like, suddenly he didn't have to always win. Like, all of a sudden, losing wasn't that bad, so long as it was to Izuku. You okay, Kachan? He held out a hand towards Katsuki, and for a moment, he remembered that day on the river. The one scene he'd run over his head over and over and over again, and had only realized recently that it was his first mistake. Damn it, Kazu, he corrected himself. You hit hard. He took the pre-offered hand this time, grinning. I'm gonna have to up my training. And that's amazing, folks! The winner of the first year's sports festival is Class 1A's Midoriya Izuku. The nerd grinned in a way that Katsuki hadn't seen since he couldn't remember when. Yeah, maybe losing to Izuku wasn't such a bad thing after all. Not that he'd ever admit it out loud. Kaigo grinned from his hospital bed as he watched the broadcast from his phone. He was awkwardly propped up in a shitty bed with Ingenium in the bed next to him. They were both watching on his phone. Look, my brother took third, Tensei stated, proudly pointing at his brother. And my brother took first, Kaigo boasted, making the other hero choke. You have a brother? He's like a brother to me, he grinned, pointing to Izuku. I'm so proud of him. He's gonna change the world someday. Izuku handed the medals to all the winners, and Izuku was given a mic for the closing speech. I know a lot of you are angry. Why should the quirkless kid win? Am I right? I can see it in your faces in the crowd. I won because I worked hard to get where I am now. Not to say my schoolmates didn't work hard too, because they did. Every single one of them, whether they made it past the first round or not, deserves recognition. He paused to let the people clap. Contrary to popular belief, nobody is born useless or worthless. We're all born at a different starting line. Some of us need to run faster and farther and work a million times harder than others. And that's okay, because it's these challenges that we face that ultimately shape us as people. We never are who we were yesterday, and we never will be. Every day, we are someone new in a small, insignificant way. And eventually, be it a week from now or a year from now, we'll be completely different people. And that's how it should be. We're meant to change, not stagnant. Sometimes we should change ourselves, and sometimes we change others. Sometimes a single insignificant act is all it takes to push someone over the edge or pull them back from it. So reach out a hand to the people around you today and become who you never thought you were yesterday. You never know how much a single word or kindness will change someone's life. He grinned right into the camera. I told you today I'd prove that quirkless does not worthless. Now I challenge you to prove it to yourselves. All of you out there who are put down in the way you were born. Quirkless, weak-quirked, malformed, villains in the making, whatever they call you. Prove them wrong. Become a better you. If I can do it, so can you. No dream is unattainable if you're willing to reach for it. Izuku handed the mic back to Midnight, cheeks flushing and red as the crowd erupted into cheers and several boos, but there were significantly more cheers than there were at the beginning of the festival. Your brother certainly has a passion and a way with words, Tensei grinned. He's been through a lot in his life. Kaigo's smile dimmed greatly. So what do your results say? I have some minor nerve damage, but with physical therapy I should be back on my feet in no time. I really can't thank you enough. They said that if you hadn't gotten there when you did, the damage might have been irreparable. No worries, Kaigo waved him off. You're fine now. That's what matters. He paused for a moment. You gonna call your brother? Yeah. I'm gonna tell mine not to come. Why? Because I'll be out of here tomorrow or the day after. He doesn't need to waste any money on the train to Hosu. Understandable, Tensei smiled. I actually have a couple of friends to call. Shota sighed as he hung up the phone. Tensei was fine. He shared a relieved look with Nemuri and Hizashi. The four had been good friends while they attended UA together. They'd all been concerned when they heard about the attack. He was worried about Midoriya, though. The kid was really close to Hawks, enough to consider him a brother. Now, Hawks was hospitalized for a few days because of the same incident. He'd have to pull the kid aside later and ask if he was doing okay. He'd do the same for Ida, but he was already gone, off to visit his brother and assure himself he was alright. He nearly jumped when his phone vibrated.
Viridian Chaos. Sorry I haven't been on lately. I'm fine. Had to give Hawks a hand is all. That's all. You idiot! Do you have any idea how worried we are? Scream. You know it's bad when Sho admits that out loud.
Ow! Hisashi glared as Shota whacked his arm again, for good measure. Don't use my civilian name. Who are you texting? Nomari glanced over Hisashi's shoulder. Viridian, Shota answered simply. Isn't the vigilante? He's a legal hero now, he corrected tiredly.
Viridian Chaos. I'm not hurt, but my phone's kinda died. Can't exactly charge it on a stakeout, you know? Dadzawa, you're incorrigible. Scream. Oh yeah, we're gonna have a meeting soon with Midoriya. Wanna come along? Eraser wanted to invite you. Dadzawa. The kid's gonna explain a few things, and we'd appreciate your presence there. Sugauchi's also coming along, as per the kid's request. Viridian Chaos. Yeah, I'll be there. Just let me know the day and time. Winky face.
Shota didn't know why, but he felt like Viridian was laughing at him. At any rate, it was long past time to go home. He was tired, and he no longer had any obligation to stay awake. He had a feeling that he'd need as much sleep as he could get. And that was Chapter 16, UA Sports Festival of Viridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. Thank you guys for bearing through this and being patient with my delays. Hopefully next week it will be up by Saturday. I hope you guys all have a wonderful week. Bye. See you next time.